I didn't plan to spend that night in the hospital. I drove myself there just to get checked, because the pain in my side had gone from dull to sharp, in a way that felt wrong, like something inside me had shifted and was cutting its way out. It was close to midnight when I parked. The lot mostly empty. Sodium lights buzzing overhead. Inside, the ER smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. A TV played some late-night talk show, to no one in particular. I gave my name, my birthday, explained the pain, and tried not to sound scared. They put a plastic bracelet on my wrist and told me to sit. I watched a man across the room rock back and forth, his hands cuffed to his waist. A cop standing behind him scrolling on his phone. Somewhere down the hall, someone screamed, and then went quiet. After about 40 minutes, a nurse called my name. She had tired eyes and moved fast, like she wanted to stay ahead of something. They took me through the double doors, past curtains and beeping monitors, into a small room with a bed that crinkled when I sat on it. She took my vitals, asked the same questions I'd already answered, then said a doctor would be in soon. When she left, the room felt smaller. The lights hummed. I could hear footsteps, carts rolling, a distant code announcement that made my stomach drop, even though it wasn't for me. The doctor came in, pressed on my side until I flinched, and said they wanted to keep me for observation. Possible infection. They'd move me upstairs once a bed opened. I nodded, relieved and annoyed at the same time. I texted my sister to let her know where I was. She didn't respond. Around 2 a.m., they wheeled me up to the 4th floor. The hallway was dimmer, quieter, like the building itself was trying to sleep. My room was at the end, near a fire exit. The nurse who settled me in introduced herself as Carol. She adjusted my told me to call if you needed anything, and left the door half open. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting cracks, listening to the soft chorus of machines breathing for people who couldn't. At some point, I drifted. Not real sleep, just that heavy float where time stretches. I woke to the sound of someone crying. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from the hallway, then another to realize it was close. A woman's voice, hoarse and panicked, repeating please over and over. I swung my legs over the bed and stood, the 4-pole clanking softly. I peeked through the door. 2 rooms down, a gurney was parked sideways. A nurse and a man in scrubs I didn't recognize were standing on either side of it. The woman on the gurney was older, her hair matted to her forehead, eyes wide. She was trying to sit up, but the man pressed her back down with one hand. Not gently. The nurse noticed me watching and locked eyes with me. Her expression didn't change, but she shook her head once, slow and deliberate, like a warning. I stepped back into my room and closed the door. My heart wouldn't slow down. I told myself there was an explanation. Patients panic. Things look different at night. I climbed back into bed, but every sound felt louder now. The crying stopped abruptly. I lay there staring at the door, until I must have dozed again. When I woke the second time, the door was fully open. A man stood just inside, silhouetted by the hallway light. He was wearing scrubs, but they were darker than the others I'd seen. Almost charcoal. No badge. He smiled when he saw my eyes open. "Sorry to wake you," he said quietly. "Just doing rounds." He stepped closer without waiting for a response. I noticed then that his shoes were wrong. Not hospital shoes. Work boots. I asked where Carol was. He said she'd been pulled to another floor. His voice was calm, practiced. He reached for my fore. I pulled my arm back. "I'm fine. I don't need anything." He paused, hand hovering, then let it drop. The smile faded, just a little. "If you need to use the restroom, it's better to have someone help you," he said. "People get dizzy." "I'm not dizzy." He watched me for a few seconds. That felt much longer. Then he nodded and stepped back. "Call if you need anything," he said, echoing Carol's words, and left. I sat there shaking. I knew hospitals were busy, understaffed, full of strangers moving in and out. But something about him felt off, in a way I couldn't explain. I picked up the phone by the bed and dialed the nurse's station. It rang and rang, then clicked to voicemail. I hung up and tried again. Same thing. A little before dawn, alarms went off somewhere down the hall. Not the steady beeping of monitors, but the sharp, urgent sound that made people run. I heard shouting, doors opening, footsteps pounding past my room. I stood again and opened the door. At the far end of the hall, a crowd had formed. A body lay on the floor, mostly hidden by legs and blue gowns. I could see an arm at an unnatural angle. Skin gray. The woman from the gurney. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Blood pooled beneath her head, spreading slowly, impossibly dark against the tile. Someone noticed me and ushered me back into my room, closing the door firmly this time. A few minutes later, Carol came in. Her face was pale. She checked my vitals with shaking hands. I asked what happened. She said there had been an incident, and everything was under control. She wouldn't meet my eyes. As she turned to leave, I saw something on her shoe. A smear of dark red, already drying. She followed my gaze and quickly stepped out, pulling the door shut behind her. I sat alone, the sun just starting to lighten the window, knowing with a cold certainty that the man in the charcoal scrubs hadn't been doing rounds at all, and that whatever had happened in this hospital overnight was far from over. The morning shift arrived like nothing was wrong. Fresh voices, brighter lights, the smell of breakfast trays rolling down the hall. No one mentioned the woman. No one explained the alarms. A different nurse came in, introduced herself, and told me I'd be getting a CT scan soon. I asked if I could speak to a doctor. She said one would stop by later. I tried calling my sister again. Still nothing. I scrolled through the news on my phone, half expecting to see something about a death at the hospital. But there was nothing. Just weather, traffic, sports. I started to wonder if I'd imagined parts of the night, if pain meds and exhaustion had twisted things. But then I remembered the boots, the way his smile dropped, the blood on Carol's shoe. They took me down for imaging around 9. As the orderly pushed my bed through the elevator, I asked him how long he'd worked there. "Too long," he said with a weak laugh. I asked if anything strange had happened overnight. He didn't answer right away. When he did, he just said, "Nights are rough," and stared straight ahead. When they brought me back upstairs, my door was closed. I was sure I'd left it open. Inside, the room felt colder. My bag was on the chair where I'd left it, but the zipper was open. I checked inside. Nothing missing, but something felt disturbed, like someone had rifled through it quickly. My phone was still there, my wallet. But my bracelet was gone. I stared at my bare wrist. Heart pounding. I knew I hadn't taken it off. I pressed the call button. This time someone answered. A nurse I didn't recognize came in. I told her my bracelet was missing. She frowned, said she'd get a replacement. When she came back, I asked her name. She said Emily, and clipped the bracelet on without looking at me. I asked her if there was a staff member named Carol working nights. She hesitated. Just a fraction. Carol transferred last month, she said. Why? I told her she'd been my nurse overnight. Emily shook her head slowly. There was no Carol on this floor last night, she said. We were short 2 nurses. I covered most of these rooms myself. My mouth went dry. I told her about the man in the charcoal scrubs. About the woman in the hallway. Emily's face tightened. She told me I needed to rest. That stress could cause vivid dreams. She adjusted my 4 and left before I could say anything else. I didn't rest. I watched the door. Every time footsteps passed, my muscles tensed. Around noon, a hospital administrator and a man in a suit came in together. The man showed a badge too quickly for me to read. They asked me questions about the night, what I'd seen, who I'd talked to. I answered honestly, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. They exchanged looks when I mentioned Carol. When I mentioned the boots, the suited man wrote something down. He thanked me and said they were investigating an unexpected death. He said there was no danger to patients. He said a lot of things that sounded practiced. After they left, I noticed the fire exit door at the end of the hall was propped open. A breeze carried in the smell of rain and something metallic. A security guard stood nearby, talking quietly into his radio. I watched him glance down the stairs, then quickly look away. Later that afternoon, my sister finally texted back, asking why I called so many times. I told her I was in the hospital, and something bad had happened. She said she was on her way. Around 4, the pain in my side spiked again. I pressed the call button. No answer. I pressed it again. Still nothing. The hallway outside was eerily quiet. I could hear my own breathing, the steady drip of the 4. Then the door handle moved. It didn't open, just a slow turn, back and forth, like someone testing it. I slid off the bed and locked the door, my hands slick with sweat. The handle stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then a soft knock. Open up, a familiar voice said. Come. Mail. We need to check your line. I backed away until I hit the wall. Get Emily, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence. Then footsteps moving away. Unhurried. Minutes later, alarms blared again. Closer this time. Shouting. Running. My door burst open as security rushed past, heading toward the stairwell. In the chaos, no one noticed me standing there, shaking, realizing that whatever had been stalking the halls last night was still here. And now, it knew I was watching. My sister arrived just after the alarms died down, her face tight with fear when she saw me. I tried to explain everything at once, tripping over my words. She believed me more than anyone else would have. But even she kept looking around the room, like she expected someone to tell her we were being dramatic. She asked to speak to a doctor. demanded answers. Our resident came in, young and clearly exhausted, and said there had been a security situation involving a former employee. He said it was contained. He said I was safe. I asked him directly if someone had died. He hesitated, then said yes. 2 people. Both patients. Both during the night shift. He wouldn't say how. He wouldn't say who had been involved. He said the hospital was cooperating with authorities. I asked if I could leave. He said they wanted to keep me another night. I told him I wasn't staying. The pain in my side didn't matter anymore. I signed papers with shaking hands, while my sister packed my things. As we waited for transport, I saw a man at the end of the hall, talking to a detective. He was wearing charcoal scrubs, work boots. His hands were cuffed behind his back. Our eyes met. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He smiled, slow and knowing, like we were sharing a private joke. A nurse stepped between us, blocking my view. And when I looked again, he was gone. They discharged me at dusk. Outside, the hospital loomed against the darkening sky, windows glowing like watchful eyes. I breathed easier once we were in the car. The doors locked, the building shrinking behind us. My sister kept asking if I was okay. I told her I would be. 2 days later, a news story broke. A hospital orderly arrested after allegedly killing 2 patients. The article said he had been fired months earlier and had no right to be there. It said security protocols had failed. It said there was no indication he'd harmed anyone else. It didn't mention a nurse named Carol. A week after that, I got a bill from the hospital. Included was a copy of my intake paperwork. I noticed something strange in the margin. Next to the time of my admission, a handwritten note. Not mine. Not any signature I recognized. Just 2 words, pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Next time. I still wake up some nights, convinced I hear footsteps in a hallway, the soft turn of a door handle, a man's calm voice telling me he's just doing rounds. I don't go to hospitals unless I have no choice. And every time I do, I check the shoes first.